In this series, and exclusive to this channel, you will hear a word-for-word account of what the jury were told after hearing 9 months of evidence during Lucy Letby's original trial. Now, with so much harmful misinformation currently being spread online and in mainstream publications surrounding this case, this series seeks to provide for the first time exactly what transpired in court. That means no ill-informed commentary or any bias, simply the evidence as presented during the trial itself. This video has been made possible by the purchasing of court-approved transcripts, further details of which can be found in the video description box below. What you'll hear next is a detailed summary of the prosecution's case against Lucy Letby. This took place at Manchester Crown Court and was conducted by Nicholas Johnson, KC. We move on to incident number 2, counts 8 and 9. Child G was transferred out to Arrow Park at 3:50 on the 8th of September, returned to Chester on the 16th of September, and once again had the misfortune to have Lucy Letby as her designated nurse on the 21st. This was her full-term date. The full extent of the brain injury Child G had suffered as a result of the earlier events wasn't yet apparent to the medics. Although I'm sure you'll remember that Child G's dad said in his agreed statement that after the incident on the 7th of September, she was not the same baby. But Child G was stable when she returned from Arrow Park and remained so until the day shift when Lucy Letby was her designated nurse. She was in room 4. Overnight on the 20th to the 21st, before Lucy Letby came on at 8 a.m, the designated nurse for Child G was Valerie Thomas, the nursery nurse. And her statement was read to you, and she recounted how Child G was taking her feed by bottle and had only one via nasogastric tube at 3 a.m. to let her rest. Val Thomas' summary you will find at tile 44 of the second Child G sequence. I'm going to come straight to the day shift. The population distribution chart is at tile 45, please. You can see from that, ladies and gentlemen, that Lucy Letby had all 3 babies in nursery 4. And you know that she disliked being in nursery 4. Child G was due to have her immunisations. She was fed 40 ml of expressed breast milk at 9:15, according to the note made by Lucy Letby at tile 47. Though at tile 48, the nursing note suggests this happened at 9 o'clock, not 9:15. At about 10:15, according to the nursing note made by Lucy Letby later in that shift, and this is tile 50, please. I'd like to have a look at that if we can. Child G produced 2 large projectile vomits and desaturated to 35%, a life-threatening level. 30 millilitres of milk was aspirated from the nasogastric tube. Child G's bowels opened +++, and there was a loose green watery stool. This is almost a carbon copy, isn't it, of what happened on September 7th, when after being brought back from the brink of death, Child G had passed a large watery stool, according to the note of Dr. Ventress. Child G had been sabotaged again by Lucy Letby. But if you look at Child G's observations just before this at tile 46, J7831, you will see that her observations were entirely normal. You'll remember this one, ladies and gentlemen, the 9 o'clock one, as being the occasion where somebody put in 2 temperature readings. Who could have done that? Why would somebody do that? When I asked Lucy Letby about it in cross-examination, I suggested she had been making it look like Child G was declining before she vomited again. Well, you will decide. Is it just a mistake, an error, or in the context of all the other inaccurate records made by Lucy Letby at important times, can you be sure that yet again this is an effort by her to misrepresent what was going on? To give the impression to the outsider that there was a benign natural reason for Child G's collapse. Context is everything, isn't it? Dr. Fielding arrived and was told by the nursing staff that Child G's abdomen was more distended than usual. That's tile 51. He recorded 2 projectile vomits, which, as Dr. Gibbs said, is very unusual. We've heard all that before, haven't we, on September 7th. We say this, as in many other instances, it is a coincidence too far. It's yet another example of Lucy Letby trying to kill one of the children in the neonatal unit. Later that evening, Lucy Letby was misrepresenting what had happened when she texted her friend Nurse A. If we go to tile 111 at 21:20, she said this, quote, "Looked rubbish when I took over this morning. Then she vomited at 9 and I got her screened." Put that against what was to happen further down the line, ladies and gentlemen. It shows you the power of circumstantial evidence, doesn't it? Lucy Letby was giving the impression to her senior colleague, the impression that she had inherited a problem, which was untrue. When you think about what happened to the babies O, P and R boys who we dealt with yesterday, and what I'm yet to remind you about child N, it becomes very clear what's going on, doesn't it? Lucy Letby didn't mention having fed child G to her friend Nurse A, did she? Why do you think that was? You may think it would make no sense for her to have fed child G without referring her to a doctor first, if what she was saying in the text is true. This is the mirror image of child N, isn't it? Where she's saying, do you remember, I didn't feed him because I was waiting for the doctors, because he didn't look very well. Or, as Nurse E had said in one of the notes, child N looked like shit. You'll remember that. It's a lie to divert suspicion. If we look at tiles 100 to 114, there's an interesting conversation about child G. It starts with Lucy Letby saying, quote, "Sounds like Wednesday night might not be on now." Let me just get my reference here. Yes, there we are. "Not enough interest." And that provokes a response from Nurse A, quote, "Yeah, I heard about Wednesday. What's up with child G? I was a bit unsure about her being put in for so fast. Seemed too good to be true, and trust her." And then, quote, "You on tonight?" And Lucy Letby responded, "Been on today." "Ah," says Nurse A, "thought you weren't on nights. Child G septic again." Then this, "Nights Friday, Saturday, Sunday, child G vomiting, pale apneas DSATs on Optiflow in 1, CRP 18, been cold for the last 24 hours. And you'll remember, take note of that in the context of the double entry in the temperature chart. Due date today, exclamation mark. That's what I was pointing out to you before, the fact that she well knew, did Lucy Letby. Then responses from Nurse A, quote, "Oh, she likes to celebrate the big ones in style. When was she screened if being cold for 24 hours? Then, due immunisations today too. I got her screen this morning after she vomited. Was she still in 4 then? Then this, yep, and had nursery nurse all weekend. Looked rubbish when I took over this morning. Then she vomited at 9 and I got her screened." Nurse A replies, "See, it really worries me. I wasn't on when she was moved, but I wouldn't have done it myself." Then tile 113, Lucy Letby. "I personally felt it was a big jump considering how sick she was just a week ago. Being in 4 is bad enough, and then having a nursery nurse that just don't always know what to look for, act on. Mum said she hasn't been herself for a couple of days. So nursery nurse is bad, they don't know what to look for. Or is this just all lies to create the impression with her colleagues? It's obvious what's going on, isn't it? It ties in, though, doesn't it, with child J. Nursery nurses shouldn't be doing stomas. Until we saw the BAPM guidelines, which say, yeah, nursery nurses can do stomas. Lucy Letby didn't write her note until 12:47. It's tile 48. Just look at the top of the page, please. She wrote that child G was pale. She also wrote temperature 36.4, hat in situ and well wrapped. Holding that temperature in your head, if you go back to tile 46, she had made a mistake because in the temperature section of the observation chart, Lucy Letby had entered a normal temperature of 36.8. This all ties in with the being cold in the last 24 hours sent as a text to Nurse A later that evening. It's all part of the false narrative, isn't it? It couldn't be clearer, we suggest. Could not be clearer. So going back to the 21st of September then, ladies and gentlemen, the first incident that day is count 8. Moving on to count 9, following the first incident, Nurse B took over as child G's designated nurse. But you'll remember, I'm sure, that Nurse B had another baby in room 1. Lucy Letby remained in nursery 4 with child G, and count 9 relates to the incident where child G was behind a screen having a cannula inserted into her and what happened thereafter. I'm sure you remember this. You'll remember it was at about 15:30, so mid-afternoon, and you'll remember, I'm sure, that the medical staff were having problems getting a cannula into child G because she'd been in hospital for so long and so many cannulas put in different parts of her that it was proving difficult. And Dr. Chang, who I'm sure you remember from the children O, P and R, had failed to put in the cannula, and so the senior consultant, Dr. Gibbs, was called in. Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Harkness set up a screen in room 4, put child G onto a trolley to carry out the procedure. And whilst that was going on, from time to time, nurse B would come into the room from looking after her other baby in room 1. And each time she did so, she went behind the screen and saw what was going on. She saw that the monitor was switched on and child G was attached to it while the procedure was being carried out. Nurse B told us that about a month before she gave evidence, so she gave evidence to you about this on the 13th of December, she had contacted the police in this case to tell them that she believed Lucy Letby had not switched off the monitor because on the 21st of September 2015, after the event, both Drs. Gibbs and Dr. Harkness were outside nursery 4 when one of them, and she couldn't remember who it was, had apologised to her for not having put the monitor back on and for having left child G behind the screen. When this was suggested on behalf of Lucy Letby to Dr. Gibbs, he replied that he had no recollection of that incident, but what he did say was that if Nurse B said it was true, he accepted it was true. Dr. Harkness, it was suggested to him as well. He was not quite as accommodating to the suggestion. He said to the police and to you that he had told a nurse that they had completed the cannulation and that one reason was that they were so keen to get fluids going again for child G because child G hadn't had any fluids for 6 hours. So what Dr. Harkness is saying is she wasn't just left there and the message not passed on, because the whole point of this exercise was that child G had not had any fluids for 6 hours, and therefore it was important, and therefore we needed to tell the nursing staff that the procedure had been completed. Dr. Harkness gave you that evidence back on the 12th of December last year. When he was cross-examined, Dr. Harkness was reminded of a statement in which he had said that the sudden collapse of babies of child G's age was quite common, and he replied this: "Well, when I worked at Chester, that was my view, because that was my experience, but my more recent and more extensive experience elsewhere leads me to review that as a suggestion," and he did not accept. Well, we say, ladies and gentlemen, that exchange about what Dr. Harkness had put in a statement really highlights the point that the behaviour of a single rogue nurse in a neonatal unit, that behaviour in effect gaslighted all the other staff into believing what was wholly exceptional was in fact normal. Dr. Harkness now, with his more extensive experience since leaving Chester, recognised in the evidence he gave to you on December 12th that child G's collapse was not normal by any standards. Whatever conclusion you draw about the evidence surrounding this final event, you will, we suggest, want to look at all the circumstances with a critical eye. Particularly as Nurse B was out of the room in Nursery 1, and Lucy Letby, the only children for whom she was responsible, were in Nursery 4 with child G. What Nurse B said was that child G was back in her cot when she came back into the room, having heard Lucy Letby shouting for help. Is it as Lucy Letby suggested, that she moved her from the trolley, having found her in extremis, put her back in the cot and then neopuffed her? Is that a realistic suggestion? We suggest not in her case. Is it credible, do you think, that 2 doctors would have carried out a cannulation on a child with a history like child G, and yet would not have put the monitor back on and attached it? The monitor that Dr. Harkness said was definitely not turned off. Whatever Nurse B says that Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Harkness said to her, it's clear that neither of them can remember it, and no one made a note in either the nursing notes or the medical notes. And Dr. Gibbs made it very clear, having made his concession, that whatever the position was with regard to the monitor, he would have made sure that child G was stable once he'd cannulated her and before he left. And he also said he would have told someone that he had finished. And if Nurse B wasn't in the room, then we suggest there is only one person he could have told. And that is, of course, Lucy Letby. So is it an innocent coincidence that child G desaturated just after Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Harkness left the room, having left her in a stable condition? And why was Lucy Letby behind the screen at all? Why did she simply not pass on the message to Nurse B? Why didn't Lucy Letby move the screen? We say that you can be sure from a combination of all these circumstances and taking them in the light of all the other evidence in the case that this was another occasion when Lucy Letby tried to kill child G, having failed on her previous 2 attempts. It was put to Nurse B on behalf of Lucy Letby that Lucy Letby had spoken to her and had been cross that the doctors had left child G behind the screens with the monitor off. Well, Nurse B didn't remember that, did she? Neither did she remember the conversation that was being suggested to her about putting in a proposed Datix report or dealing with things her own way. She didn't remember, ladies and gentlemen, because what was being suggested to her by Lucy Letby was not true. And this is an example, isn't it, of her opportunistic character. She saw a baby behind a screen and thought she would attack it. It was not until after Christmas that we heard from Doctors Evans and Bowen about Count 8. We didn't deal with any expert evidence in relation to Count 9 because that's just a factual issue. That's for you to determine on the facts. So just dealing with the incident in the morning then of the 21st, Dr. Evans said that the degree of desaturation at 10:15, together with the 2 projectile vomits and the aspiration of 30 ml of milk in a baby who had only been fed 40 ml, was all indicative of the fact that once again child G had been overfed with potentially catastrophic consequences. Dr. Evans thought that the fact that child G's stomach had to be aspirated supported his view, and he disagreed with the suggestion put to him in cross-examination that this was some sort of self-resolving issue. The point that Dr. Bowen stressed was one that we suggest is very much common sense. It was what she called basic arithmetic. 2 times large projectile milky vomits. You'll see that in Lucy Letby's note at tile 50. Plus the 30 ml that was aspirated meant that child G was fed much more than she should have been. It's as simple as that. We suggest that you should look at the 10:15 incident in the context of what happened 3 weeks earlier. On both occasions, clear evidence that Lucy Letby was involved. When looking at the event on September 7th, please bear in mind the event on the 21st. These 2 events, we say, are very similar, albeit the consequences of the first were very much more severe, and they are lifelong as far as child G is concerned. You heard that she'll forever be fed through a PEG because of the brain damage she suffered on September 7th. The fact that Lucy Letby in those circumstances attacked her again during the morning and then yet again during the afternoon, we say, self-evidently proves her intention to kill.